Welcome to the award-winning Tough Girl podcast, now celebrating 10 years. I'm Sarah Williams, and every week I bring you stories from women in the world of adventure and physical challenge. Get inspired, stay motivated, and be part of a movement that's increasing the visibility of female role models, especially in relation to adventure and endurance. New episodes every Tuesday at 7 a.m. UK time. Support the mission at patreon.com/Tough Girl Podcast and dive deeper at toughgirlchallenges.com.
So I am Sharon Evans and I'm known by the brand of Wheeling Kiwi. I'm based in New Zealand and right now I'm in the Waikato, which you will remember, Sarah, you walked through it 18 months ago. So if you recall going over Parongia Mountain, I'm nearby there. And what I do is I'm basically a storyteller. So I go out on adventures and then find different ways of sharing what I've done to tell that story, to share with people through social media and my own website. That's involving taking videos and writing blogs about it and creating vlogs, whichever way it takes to get that story out there. And in a practical sense, I spend a lot of time outdoors, and it would seem a lot of it is uncomfortable and wet because people seem to like that and the bad weather follows me.
Have you always been growing up in New Zealand, I just feel as though everyone in New Zealand is outdoorsy. So I feel silly even sort of saying, were you outdoorsy as a child? But have you always enjoyed spending time in nature?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know, I don't remember going on the first walk or the first camp or anything like that. From the time I was a baby, my parents had a section at the beach and a couple of ancient caravans, and we used to go over there and camp. So, while I was still a babe in arms, and everything just sort of flowed from there. So as I'm a Gen X, I'm 58 years old. So we were the ones who were kicked out after breakfast, told not to come home until the street lights were on at night time. We lived outside, and we're very, very privileged to be able to do that and just have enormous freedom in where we lived, through different addresses over the years, that we could just go out safely and just have a wild time, just the local gang of kids.
Yeah. When did you start really traveling? When did your passion for travel start?
My passion for travel, I don't know if you'd call it a passion, but my mum is from Australia, so we have always been back and forth spending time in Australia. But when I was very young, my parents took us to Borneo, to Malaysia, the Malaysian Sabah state of Malaysia and Borneo, to live. And so that's some of my earliest memories, is basically living in the jungles outside Kota Kinabalu. And again, we still had that freedom there. But while we were there, we also travelled to other countries around. So just the whole thing has flowed on really from there. And my parents had lived in other places as well. So it all just was quite normal to shift to different places to spend time outdoors.
Do you know what I think really interesting is when you were growing up, there wasn't social media. There wasn't like Facebook and TikTok and YouTube and being a YouTuber and being able to, create videos and share stories in that format. It was, if you wanted to produce a podcast, you needed a studio. If you wanted to be on TV, that was the only option. And so actually what you're doing now wasn't around when you were growing up.
No, you're absolutely right. And if you sort of turn the clock back a few decades, it's what we can do now would really be beyond belief, because the technology has advanced so rapidly. I got my first camera, I think, when I was about 15 years old. I used to go away for school holidays, and I'd catch a bus to another town where I had friends staying, and go away for the 2 weeks or the 3 weeks or whatever. And I remember buying a camera then, and it was a film camera, of course. So the camera was as cheap as can be, and probably a disposable one, but the expense was in getting the films developed. So you were very, very careful about what photos you took, and none of them were terribly good back in those days. But yeah, to see, we all carry a camera in our pockets now, don't we?
Mm. And just to think as well, you can change the vibes, the color, you can just do so
Yeah.
much editing just on your phone. It's crazy. I mean, I still remember I went backpacking around Europe with one of my friends and we had the disposable cameras and it cost an absolute fortune when you come back to get. We used to go to Boots, which is like, the pharmacy over in the
Yes.
UK
Yes.
to get them all developed and then created a photo, got them printed out. They, like you say, they weren't the best photos.
And you'd have to wait for a week or something for
Yeah.
them to actually be produced, and you'd be so excited, and you'd get them out and think, "Oh, there's a big fingerprint across that one," and
But you've probably always been a storyteller. You've loved the outdoors. You've loved uh this ability to share your stories. But the facilities, I suppose, or the options when you were growing up, it wasn't really, I suppose, an option. So what did you do with your life? And then when did you make the change to think, actually, this isn't what I want to do anymore?
when I first left home after school, and I'd sort of headed off to Auckland to do further training up there. And it was really, at that time, I was thinking, well, I want to travel. Before even leaving school, I'd sort of had this idea that it'd be wonderful to be a travel photographer. And my mum used to subscribe to the National Geographic magazine. So just as you're saying, back then we didn't have social media to give us inspiration. Each month we got a beautiful National Geographic magazine, and I used to just pore over those photos. But for whatever reason, I didn't even attempt to go down, that career path. And instead I went traveling and sort of backpacking around the place. Just I was never too organized in what I did. I'd just head off and, see how long the money lasted. And then when it ran out, you'd do a bit of work and then carry on for a little bit longer. But just going back to your comment, saying I was possibly always a storyteller, like a lot of content creators, I'm quite introverted, and growing up terribly, terribly shy, much happier to keep in the background. And so it has been more recently that I've pushed myself into the foreground, and that's sort of all around part of the reason I do what I do. I sort of focus on the people who I'm trying to get my message to, and I sort of force myself into the foreground. And the more you do this silly stuff, the easier it gets, of course.
Tell us more about Wheeling Kiwi. Where did the name come from?
Yes, the Wheeling Kiwi brand. For about 10 years, I was cycling at our local indoor velodrome, so track cycling, push bikes, and absolutely loved it. And that coincided really with the career I had at the time. For about 20 years, I was a rural real estate agent in New Zealand, which meant I was selling country property, farms, and lifestyle property. And it was a very intensive type job. There was a lot of stress in it. And as I was on commission sales, so you work 7 days a week and you work every single hour you can be, because you're on commission sales. And along with that, I used to go to the velodrome 3 mornings a week. And, leave home, get up at 4:30 in the morning to get over there. It's in a different town, and do this track cycling. So you may not be, or you may be familiar with a track bike, but with a track bike, it doesn't have any gears. It's it's just the one gear. You can't change the gear. It has no brakes, and so you can't. When you're cycling, there's something called freewheeling. So if you're out for a ride and you stop pedaling, that's freewheeling. Your pedal can just stay in one place. Whereas on a track bike, your pedals keep going around. And if you forget and sort of stop pedaling while you're on the track, they sort of just kick you, and you have to keep turning your feet. And there seem to be some interesting parallels between that and my career, whereas I was just on this treadmill in my career nonstop, keeping my head above water, and definitely not freewheeling. So that is where the freewheeling comes from. As well as track riding, I also ride road and trails and whatnot. So yeah, it was just that type of bike.
Yeah. So when did you start thinking, actually, I want to make a change in my life. I want something different from working in, rural real estate. And actually, this isn't what I want to be doing anymore. When did that start happening?
That would have started happening around 5 years ago. I started to get a little bit more serious about it. And I was thinking then, actually, I'm going to be coming up to 20 years in this career, and it's a pretty stressful type career. And 20 years is more than enough in that. So I started to look for a new direction. And around that time, I was also, because of that, because it's a stressful job, I was dealing with a lot of people's stresses and seeing how people felt out there. So it kind of coincided of thinking, I'm going to have a change in my lifestyle. And what can I do? I wanted a complete change to get away from that kind of corporate thing. And what can I do to kind of give back? Although that was a very giving job. And that's around where the whole thing about spending time in nature, and that sort of all flowed from there. So there were a lot of changes in my life at that time, and my kids had grown up. They were independent. I was, able to do, I didn't have to worry about them, to do more of my own thing, and, really, really fortunate to be able to do that. And just, so I gradually started stepping away from that role. And for the first time, I started planning weekends, because that kind of job, you work weekends as well. So I'd take the occasional long weekend off, which was lovely. And then, sort of planned some time off over the summer, a couple of weeks off. Things that was absolutely unheard of. I'm looking back at it now, I don't believe what I was doing, but I just worked all the time. Like, I'm, self-employed is what you do. And it's not healthy. So it was, absolutely time to make a change.
Yeah. I suppose 5 years ago, again, would be like, 2020, so COVID times as well. Was that also sort of...
Yeah, it was a header then, because what I had planned in those early days, one of the things I was going to do is one of my first trips, sort of on this more current chapter of my life, was to go to Everest Base Camp, and I'd actually booked it. A friend and I, a friend's brother and I, were going to go up there, and the whole the whole COVID thing was starting to happen, and my flight was, I think it was like the 3rd or 4th of April. It was early April 2020, and the suitcases were sort of packed in at the door as the world was shutting down. So that obviously all went by the by. I did get there eventually. It took a few false starts, but I did get up to Nepal eventually.
So what was some, I suppose, almost your I suppose, figuring it out, like, because I think this transition, I think a lot of people find really fascinating. It's something that I find fascinating, something, that I know, that I've done myself as Mel, changing your career, doing something completely different, following your passions, taking that time to really reevaluate your life and think, oh, hold on, how do I want to spend my time? How do I want to spend my weekends? What should I be doing? Like, how do I manage this, with, I suppose, with your, with kids leaving home, but also like financially, how can I make this work for the lifestyle that you've been living? Are you a planner in the sense that you sat down, wrote out a detailed plan? Were you more like, did you have specific goals that you were aiming towards? Was it more sort of free based, as in, let's just go with the flow? I'm going to give myself X amount of time and X amount of budget to make this happen. What was your transition journey like?
I am a planner in great detail when it comes to some things. I'm out with the spreadsheets and I want to know everything about it. But in making that transition, I sort of set a date, which was going to be that 20 years. And to kickstart off that sort of transition, I went for a long walk, Te Araroa, which is the New Zealand's national walk, which was going to, take me out of circulation for 4 or so months. And I sort of had this idea that I'd have all this time and, be able to figure out the rest of my life. And of course, you don't have all this time, as you know, Sarah. So you don't get all the answers to life's big problems. But I was in the very fortunate position that I was able to lower my cost of living. I've never been a big spender anyway. I've always been very, very careful. I'm really not a consumer apart from what I absolutely have to have. So I just, cut back on those costs. I've sold some real estate as well, which has just given me a little bit more space to be able to do what I want to do without those huge debts of mortgages and whatnot. And just making the transition. But as for the new career, as to whether I sort of planned that out in detail, my only plan was figuring out what my why was and the reason for the whole freewheeling Kiwi, and that's to encourage more women and to get out there and spend time in the outdoors. And the way I wanted to do that is by demonstrating that if someone like me who's in their 50s, who's not a super athlete or anything, nothing special, if I can get out there and do this stuff and people would see that, then maybe that would give them the confidence that they could as well. And I've just gone along with, if I really focus on my why, and that's to encourage people to get outside in nature, the rest of it will figure itself out somehow. So absolutely do not have even half the answers to the process yet. Still bumbling along. Certainly the income has changed. Going from even commission sales to being a content creator. But while the income has changed, my life is far richer for it.
Tell us about Te Araroa. Tell us about, planning to hike 3,000 kilometers. Obviously, it is in your neck of the woods. I'm sure you know a huge amount out about it. Did you have any concerns, any thoughts? What were you thinking about before taking on the trail?
I did get that spreadsheet out, and I worked out, my partner and I did it, Andrew and I did it. And so I had the whole spreadsheet out and worked out where we'd be spending every night, all the distances, a good idea of where we'd be doing resupply. But in doing that, I knew the first day, well, as soon as we got to 90 Mile Beach, which is at the start of the southbound trek, that itinerary would be, disappear out over the waves, so to speak. But it helped me just to kind of formulate in my mind how this whole thing was going to work. And we did have, like a lot of people, we couldn't just go out there endlessly. We did have a date that we had to get back by. Andrew is a farmer, so he had to get back to his farm. We couldn't just kind of keep going forever. So that helped to create the whole framework for that. And yeah, I guess in an ideal world, we would both have been able to train more for it and gone into it stronger and fitter. But sometimes that's pretty hard with life as well. So I thought, well, heck, we'll get fit as we go along, which we did. We were pretty fit by the time 3,000 kilometers later, I can tell you. But yeah, it's not. Yeah, I wasn't too concerned about too much. I'll take that back. My one sort of real concern was a physical one, and that was about getting too cold, because I really, really do feel the cold. And if you go out for a week-long hike or a weekend hike or whatever, just those shorter missions, you can take the big bag with the much better clothing, and you're far better equipped than when you're doing a through hike. Because on a through hike, you're covering all seasons and all weathers, particularly in New Zealand where we get all seasons in one day, but you can't carry as much equipment. And we started on the 2nd of October, which is still pretty chilly here. It was pretty frosty when we started. And yes, I did get cold. I was cold a lot on it, but you just learn to deal with it. I mean, we got snowed on 4 times in January, which is our summer. Yeah.
Had you done many trips or adventures with Andrew before? Like, did you know that you were going to be okay walking this as a couple?
Oh, heck no, not at all. We started in October, as I just said, and we had only started dating in December, sort of 10 months earlier. So we'd only been dating for a while, and about 4 months, and it came around to April, probably April Fool's Day, and I said to Andrew, I'm thinking about this. Would you like to come with me? And he was at ready for a big transition in his life also, and he sort of came back to me a few days later and said, yeah, let's do it. So really, we'd only been dating a few months, and we had our first anniversary at Starville Hut on the Richmond Ranges. And, we really did joke about it. Like, the first part of that trek, when you start at Cape Reinga and then you spend pretty much a week wandering down 90 Mile Beach. So you're on a beach for days. And we sort of joked that if we get to Ahipara, which is at the southern end of the beach, and we're still talking, we're probably going to be okay for the rest of it. So it really made us. We really, what was the word you would say? Just as a couple.
Solidified?
It solidified our relationship because, boy, you're seeing, the best, the worst, and all of it with someone when you're living in a tiny tent with them for 4 months, and you're going through challenges of you're exhausted, or the food's disagreeing with your tummy, or you can't get through the river, and all of that fun stuff, as well as all the beautiful stuff. So by the time we got to the end of 90 Mile Beach, we're pretty strong.
Do you know what I was just thinking? When you said, sharing a small tent, I was just like, oh, you had to share a tent. And I was like, oh, of course, that's what couples do. But I'd be like, I've got a 2-person tent just for me.
And it's small.
Did you just have a 2-person tent for the two of you? Or I'd want a 4-person tent.
No, we had a 2-person tent. We did our best to keep all our weight down. So I did plan that. I did weigh every single thing, before we left, and knew exactly what we were taking. We're just not ultralight hikers, though. We didn't take any luxuries as far as I was concerned. Oh, you might think it's a luxury, Sarah, but we took a stove. We shared that tent, and it did have, you could leave your packs outside. So on either side there was a covered area, I can't think what you call it, that you could leave your pack outside. And so it was just us inside. So it was certainly cozy, but hey, it was a great way for me to keep warm.
Yeah. So you said, the best and the worst. Let's talk about some of the highlights and some of the challenges, some of those magical moments, what are the standout moments from the trail? I know it's a difficult question because it is obviously such a long trail, but when was the moment that you were like, yeah, this is truly epic?
The highlight for me when I reflect back on it of that whole journey, 133 days it took, it was all about the people. It was the community, and that was the people on the trail, but possibly more so the people who were off the trail. So we walked the entire thing, or we hitched bits and pieces when the roads got too dull, and that created. Yeah, we really enjoyed that because you'd meet locals in all these communities that you're going through, and that was just so neat. Which we, if we hadn't walked past these farm homes and whatnot, and people would come out and say, "What are you doing?" So that was very, very special, and all those people were sort of adding their own bit of textile to our tapestry. Just loved it. And then when we were wandering through Canterbury, and I guess we'd been on the trail, maybe 80 or 90 days, I can't remember now. So we're well into it. So you've more than figured out all the things you got to figure out, and it was just that sense of knowing the land and the connection to the land, which I believe can only come when you spend such a long time out there, and so you're very familiar with the clouds, the way the weather's moving across, or you're seeing the moon and knowing if it's full moon or what part of the moon's calendar you're in. And it did take. It wasn't until we got down to about Canterbury, so I guess 3 months into it, that maybe we sort of stuck our heads up to be a little bit more observant. But also around that time the weather improved, because up until then it had been pretty tough going. We did get a lot of rain through it.
I think the hardest bit would be maybe walking through where your home was.
Yes.
And you just be like, oh, did you ever want to quit? Did you ever want to stop? Or were you just loving it, just in the zone?
Yeah, I don't know if I would say is loving it the right word. I'm very, very driven, and I was absolutely determined that, barring emergencies or really bad accident like breaking your leg, I was going to finish that track somehow. And so, because it does come past, it's about an hour's drive from where we were living in the Waikato, and yeah, we could have got someone to pick us up and all the rest, but I thought, no, that would be so hard. You're going to get home, you're going to get back to the couch and all your home comforts. I thought, no, we are not going to do that, which was great. But it was so neat for us because we had a lot of family and friends would come out and meet us in different places, which, they went out of their way, bring us food and treats and all the rest of it. So that did help. We didn't need to see the physical house. We did see a lot of our members of our family.
So this was your first through hike, correct?
Yeah.
What would you say I suppose, are some of the key lessons that you learned, which you think actually for new hikers when they take on their first trial, these are some of the mistakes that they're probably going to make, or these are the mistakes that you made, not necessarily like a mistake, but as in like, oh, this is a lesson, I need to learn from this.
Yeah, I think it is very difficult to keep the weight of your pack down. And we did get caught out in Palmerston North, which is before you go into a big section called the Te Araroa Ranges, which is it's a pretty gnarly section. And I'd made about 200 dehydrated meals, which I'd posted to various places, particularly the South Island, but some others just because we had people, friends living in these towns that we were passing through, and it was a way of keeping our costs down. And so when we got to Palmerston North, we picked up our own resupply box. We were also gifted by one of the brands I work with a resupply box as well. So we kind of ended up with double the food. But it was also good that we wanted to take it rather. Really, in hindsight, we should have sent some of it on, but we just didn't because you're kind of in the moment and just going with the flow of things. So we headed into that section with more weight. And while it might only be 2 or 3 kilos, when you're going into some really gnarly mountains, that tends to add up. So we did get quite caught out by that. And by the time we reached Wellington, it's like we've got to do something about this extra weight. And we actually went into one of the sports stores in Wellington thinking, right, we're going to get an ultralight pack. Not that our packs are hugely heavy, but we've got to get rid of weight here somehow. We had nothing to send home. There was nothing that we could send home because we're using everything every day. And we're very, very fortunate because in that particular store, the person who was assisting there had walked Te Araroa the whole way and then also done half of it, coming back the South Island. So they knew exactly what we were talking about. And they were very helpful because they said to us, once what you carry, your pack and your stuff is over 12 kilos, these super lightweight packs, they're just no good because they've not got the frames to give you support. So, it's that compromise. The pack's lighter, but you're not, it's going to hurt your back and all the rest of it. So we ended up, carrying on with our packs because as you continue, through those next sections at the top, particularly of the South Island, the next sections are sort of 8 or 9 days. And with the amount of food you have to carry and potentially water, if you're a dry season, it's very difficult to get your pack. How did you go? Was your pack below 12 kilos?
Probably not.
Yeah, I don't know how people can do it. Yeah. So that was, just trying to keep your weight down. So that for other people, just do whatever you can to, not carry extra stuff.
For that one, I had the Osprey EJA 48, I think, or something.
Right. Yeah.
But it is interesting because I think so when I looked at my gear, the only area that I could, because sleeping bag, thermarest, like all like my down jacket, like everything is so light now. I can't get any of like my gear lighter. My 2 options for lighter gear was a lighter tent, or like you said, going for an ultralight backpack.
The pack, yeah.
And I ended up changing my tent, which was a big mistake because it can't. Most people when they use their tents, they're using it say 2-3 days. Whereas we're doing 100+ days on a trail and I try and wild camp as much as I can.
Yes.
It just takes such a battering that actually the ultra lightweight tents are just not worth. So my tent was like 900 grams. So I saved like was 1.2. So I saved like 300 grams on tent weight and just caused me so much stress.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but randomly, I'm going to be trying out an atom pack, which is going to be a lighter pack. But I am intrigued to see how it carries, especially if I've got to do a bigger food carry. Because
Yeah. Yeah.
on the ranges, and I'm moving. I'm moving. I don't know how quickly you were moving, but on the ranges, I think I took food for 9 days. But potentially,
Yeah.
you would need food for almost 12 days, I'd say.
Just in case
Yeah,
sort of
just in
thing.
case. Yeah,
Yeah.
for the weather.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also in New Zealand, the weather is so extreme that your tent gets an absolute battering, doesn't it?
Mm.
And you're packing it away and it's wet, and you're sort of shoving it in and then trying to air dry it as you're walking along later in the day if you're lucky. And yeah, it's really tough going when you start getting into those lightweight tents. We were fortunate because Andrew and I could share the weight of the tent. Um, in practical sense, that means he carried it.
No, no,
I
but
carried
also
I carried the footprint.
but how old Andrew?
Andrew is 55.
55. So you've got to think as well. If
50,
you're
56, 56. He's
50,
2 years younger than me.
I'll be what am I? I'm forgetting my age. I'm 42,
Yeah, I
43.
know.
But actually, there is a big difference because I've noticed a difference from 32 to 42. And so,
Yes.
50, 55, 56, or 58 or whatever, again, that's a huge amount of weight to be carrying on through. And I always think it's interesting on the trickier section. So it's the rivers. How did you find like the river crossings? Like, did you have a technique for that? Like, or were you okay river crossing? Is this something that you've maybe grown up with and being very aware of, like having been brought up in New Zealand?
No, I didn't really grow up with it. I mean, untold time spent at beaches with estuaries, but not river crossings. And if the estuary was full, you just didn't cross it, sort of thing. So that's that's all experience I've gained more as an adult. But of course, if you're, when you're just going out for a week or a weekend, you can really pick your weather and avoid those really stormy times or rainy times. Whereas when you're on a through hike, you've got no choice. And we were always prepared to wait, or we were prepared to detour, which we ended up doing, a couple of times, just walking a longer way around to get around a river which we felt was too sketchy for us to cross. And it's interesting. Andrew and I had gone the first overnight backpacking trip he did with me. It's probably one I think he still probably needs counselling for. It had absolutely poured down. It had gone up a mountain, really huge mountain. We meant to go up and over it and down the other side to a hut for the night. And there was not meant to be a river crossing to get to this hut. But because of the storm that had come out of nowhere, by the time we got down, the main river, which we were never going to cross, was just a torrent. But what should have been something you could pretty much jump over was this torrent as well. And Andrew, he is a lot taller than me. He's probably a foot taller than me, at least, and he's about 30 kilos. He's a man. He is much bigger than me, and he thought he could cross it, and there was just no way in heck I was going to go anywhere near that thing. And so I stood back and watched him, and I actually filmed him. I got it on the GoPro because I watched him go down this bank, and then he just disappeared. The water knocked him over, and when I replayed that film, you can hear me just saying, "Get up, get up, get up."
Yeah.
And he popped up again. And we didn't stay in the hut. We put up our tents in the pouring rain basically in the middle of the marsh field. So we're both very, very cautious of rivers. Andrew lost an uncle in a drowning incident in a river when he was a child. So it's something where, we are very, very wary of and give water huge respect.
Yeah. Oh no, like 1,000%, because like people say it, but I've said it. Like rivers in New Zealand they're not the same as like rivers in the UK. Like they can
No,
change
no.
so rapidly,
Yeah.
and the wrong like the pressure as well. And also what I found it, because I'm quite tall, like if I'm crossing, there
Yes.
was some rivers that shorter women were struggling with, because
Yeah.
say the water's coming up to my knee, but then the it's pressing against your thigh, so it's coming up halfway against my
And that's
thigh.
quite different. Yeah.
It is,
Yeah.
and when for some of the shorter women, it's coming up to their thigh, and then the pressure is coming up over their hip, and that changes everything. But so you
Yeah.
definitely have to have, the respect. Like it needs, like, I feel as though I say it all the time. You've got to respect the rivers. Like it's just,
Oh, you
yeah,
absolutely do. And it's quite tricky with Andrew and I being such different heights. What he could go into, as you say, it's a safe depth for him, but it's not for me. And so you've just got to be so cautious about it as well. But not the same, but we found sometimes you'd get caught out in huge winds when you're up on the top of the mountains. And that happened in the Te Araroas. The winds just started gusting extremely strongly because they come straight from the Antarctic onto, to hit the Te Araroa range. And I was getting blown off my feet, and Andrew, because he has the bigger weight and heavier pack and all the rest of it, he was getting buffeted, but he could sort of stand his ground. And I thought, this is just going to get worse. I sort of sat down and had a moment and said, no. Yeah, we had one of those conversations. And he said, oh, I think we should. And at that moment, there was another couple who had headed out 20 minutes ahead of us. And they came back down the hill and they said, no way, we're both, he and she were both getting blown off our feet here. So you've just got to respect the weather, the rivers, the mountains and everything, and just retreat back and have another shot another day.
Yeah. I think the thing that for me took some time to getting used to was constantly having wet feet, because
Yes.
you'd leave with dry feet,
Always.
and I was just, and some days I'd be like, it's been 4 minutes and I'm crossing a river, or I'm
Yeah.
crossing a bog. I'm like, I just want dry. I mean, you get to the point where you, like, you do laugh about it and you're just like, it's been 4 minutes. It's been 4 minutes. And it's just,
Yeah.
and it's not, there's no way, like, you can't rock up. You literally have
No.
to go through. But
Yeah.
wet feet and sand walking, mud
Oh,
walking, sand
constant.
walking, road
Yeah.
walking. How did your feet cope?
My feet cope pretty well with the wet. It's funny how you're saying that. You'd go for a few minutes and then you've got wet feet. We made a point every night you'd get to camp or the hut or whatever, and your socks were wet anyway, so you try and wash them out as best you can in the nearby stream. With obviously no soap, just rinsing them, and would go to so much trouble to sort of hang them on the hut line or on a branch or whatever, trying to get and
They
sort of
don't
turn them
dry.
over. And if you could get them dry, and you'd do it knowing first thing in the morning within 4 minutes they would be wet again, but you'd still do it. And same with your shoes, you'd take the inner sole out and wash them and get them all dry. But the most difficult thing for me was I bought some new trail shoes some months earlier, and I'd already walked about 300 kilometres backpacking, walking in them over various trips. So I felt they were adequately broken in. I loved them. They were comfortable. And that's what I started on 90 Mile Beach. And by about day 3, the blisters were starting to develop. And I thought, oh, that's just all part of it. I didn't have blisters before with these shoes, but this phase will pass. And all the other walkers also had blisters and were struggling with the beach. However, it just got worse and worse, and my feet became more and more swollen. And so within a few weeks, I'd lost half my toenails. They'd just disappeared. I had blisters. My feet were just covered in blisters the size of the palm of your hand. They actually look like topographic maps with all the lines of the topograph going further and further down. And I was in excruciating pain. I was just popping painkillers and anti-inflammatories literally by the dozen every day, and just battling on, and just in so much pain. There's just nothing you can do about it. And so by the time we were sort of getting back around Whangarei, you'll remember the area, I thought this has gone on too much. I've got to go into the town and go off trail, go into town and get some medical help. So I ended up in accident and emergency in there with probably somewhat appalled doctor looking at my feet. He's saying, no, I'm going to give you some antibiotics and all the rest of it before you lose any more body parts. And I want you to go home and sit on the couch. And he looked at me and he said, you're not going to do that, are you? And I said, no, I'm not. And he said, well, at least keep your feet dry. So, all the estuaries in that area in Northland. So I did my best. But for the first 1,000 kilometres, I had a lot of pain in my feet from that. There was a couple of nights where I sort of got up at about 2 or 3, and both times we happened to be in accommodation of people, friends who'd sort of lent us their batches and whatnot that we could stay in. And I remember just getting up and sort of sitting on the couch at these various places and just sort of the tears rolling down my face because I was just in so much pain. And I think the switch finally came when we got to the Pureora forest, because the timber trail, as it's known, we rode bikes for 2 days. And I was finally off my feet. And I think that 2 days, and then we got to Taumarunui and we, sort of spent a day there organising resupply and all the rest of it. And that, my feet could finally start to mend. But yeah, that was tough going. That was really tough going. Had to dig deep for that.
See, I've never had a problem with my feet. And to be honest, when people talked about blisters, I think it's like, just like a little blister. Like, I could never understand why people couldn't walk through. Like, I just didn't get it. What ended up happening to me is after I finished New Zealand, I came home. I was home for 3 weeks, and my feet had actually grown. I think my arch had actually collapsed, and so my feet had grown by like half the size. So instead of wearing my Innovate 8.5 trainers, they were size. I was wearing the normal size trainers I always wear, and they sort of fit, but my toes were at the end. But I was like, no, this is, they should fit me. And I what annoys me is I knew deep down, but I just didn't follow my gut. I should have gone half a size up. And then when I was on the Camino Viva de la Plata, I'd never felt pain like it, and it was just,
it's awful.
I was, it's horrendous. And like, you don't know how, because normally what happens is, for me, is like, if you've got blisters, you walk for 5 minutes and then something switches, like in your brain, it's like, oh, pain in feet. Okay, she's going to carry on walking. We'll turn the pain receptor off, and then you don't feel the pain anymore. You like adapted. But with the sun blister, it was like, no, every step there was no turning off the pain. Like, it was just pain, constant, every day or every hour, every minute, every single step. There was like no relief, and it's just utterly I mean, to be honest, fair play for carrying on and pushing on through.
Well, I got to the stage I had a silk sheet as my sleeping bag liner, so you can imagine how light that is. Absolutely no weight.
Hurt.
And even I just could have nothing on my feet. So you're not even sleeping well at night time either. And you're just absolutely struggling all the time. Thank goodness for hiking poles, because they certainly got a good workout. But I would just stop. I remember walking through one of those Northland forests, and we got out to a bit where there's a bit of a forestry road, gravel road. And I just sat down in the middle of the road. Like, I couldn't go another step at that moment, even to get off the road. There was no trucks or anything, didn't matter. But I just sat down and caught my breath and got up again and carried on. Yeah. And I went up an entire shoe size when I bought those replacement shoes in Whangarei, thinking, well, my feet were so swollen, I needed to anyway. You're thinking later on, the swelling will go and all the bandages will be off that the doctor had wrapped me up in. But to this day, a year later, I'm still using that bigger size. And from that first pair of shoes I started with, I had my replacement pair all ready to mail onto me. And so they're still in the wardrobe, brand new. And I've since put them on, a year after being on Te Araroa. And I put them on, I think, oh, they're a bit tight. I'm just not going, I'm just not risking it anymore. I'm so, sort of almost paranoid about having my feet crushed.
Yeah. You mentioned that you'd prepared sort of like 200 plus dehydrated meals.
Yeah.
So I'm just intrigued because Actually, I hadn't heard this term before. It was an interview I just had with a lady who said she suffered from palate fatigue, and I've never called it that because I know that I get to the point where it's like I can't eat any more tuna, can't eat any more goat's
Yeah.
cheese, peanuts, ugh, Snickers. Actually, no, I never had that with Snickers. Snickers are always fine. But seriously,
Yeah.
there's certain foods that you've been eating a lot of, and I'm just wondering, with your dehydrated meals, did you get to the point when you were just like, ugh, or were you okay?
I yeah, you absolutely do get like that, but we were sort of mixing it up with we had our own resupply boxes, and you'd be through an area where you could buy supply from local supermarkets or shops and whatnot. So we did have a variety, and I think I used about might have been about 10 different recipes. So when I packed those boxes, I sort of mixed them all up, and it was a bit of lucky dip as to what you got. I sort of just wrote on. I just used Ziploc bags with a felt pen on the outside of them. But I found I did lose my appetite, and when the weather's really tough and you're trying to stop for a meal and there's nowhere to sit down because it's you just can't. It's raining and all the rest of it, and I would struggle to eat. But I think whatever it was, I would have struggled to no matter what the most gourmet food. And you get to a point where you sort of, I used to crave like having an orange or something fresh, just anything fresh, on those longer stretches.
I just wanted Whittaker's double caramel
Yeah,
chocolate.
yeah, yeah. That's good.
And
That's
crisps,
good.
bag of crisps for the salt. That I think that's what I survived on, like the crisps, and oh my, I miss that chocolate. And I miss
Eh,
the gluten-free wraps. So I don't know,
Right.
I can't remember the name of the brand, but they were always in there, and they were just amazing. How
Yeah.
how was the end of the adventure, or coming to the end, heading to Bluff? You've done the final forest section, you've done the final beach, you've coming to the end of this 3,000-kilometer journey. What was that like for you?
It was pretty incredible. You get down to the Colic Bay, and you got a couple of days. You walk into Riverton, and then that last beach you walk along, and you're on the beach, and you can look across the harbour, the bay, and you can see the little Bluff Hill, and it's like, wow, that's where we're finishing, just over there. And then you got that sort of that final stretch down to Bluff on the road, which was absolutely horrendous. The traffic going down that, I think it's 16 kilometres or whatever. That was pretty horrendous. And we had planned, just because of the timing of where we were, we thought we were going to finish on the 14th of February. And I thought, well, that's kind of cute. That's Valentine's Day. We're a new couple. But we got to Bluff on the 13th of February, and we sort of checked ourselves into the backpackers down there and thought, oh, we'll just walk around to Stirling Point, in the morning type thing. And we're sort of just sitting there, thought, no, come on, let's do it now. So we went up and over the hill and out to Stirling Point, and it's hard case because you're walking through that pretty little forest and going down those steps, and then suddenly there's sort of that restaurant there, and it's like, oh, what's this right here? And you come around the corner, so to speak, and there's that sign, and it's like it's like right there. There's no sort of sneaking up on it,
Yeah.
and it's an incredible feeling. And we just sat there on the seat, and it was quite good. There weren't too many people. There was no other hikers at that time, and so there was a handful of other tourists around other than us, and we just sat on the seat, and it was very, very emotional. We just sat there quietly. And as we sat there, because I had my Garmin on, and my mum and dad were tracking us, and they didn't expect us to be there, but Dad's habit every night at the end of the day was just check where we were. And so he had just checked, done his daily check, and he rang up. He said, "You're there." You're already there. So, we had all that excitement of that call and whatnot. But yeah, it's pretty amazing just to, have that quiet moment. And, it took so much to get us to the start of the trail. That's half the journey. just, getting to the start. Both of us, like as me as a content creator, I worked the whole way, which came with its own challenges. And Andrew, as a farmer, he worked remotely the whole way, and that also had challenges and concerns for him as to what was going on the farm and how he could support his daughter who was running the farm and, her family, how he could support them remotely. There were all those challenges. And then to sort of achieve this, and even though you start and you say, yeah, I'm going to finish it, to actually finish it is just amazing. And
Yeah.
I would have turned around and walked home, but Andrew wasn't having a bar of it.
Get a taxi back.
Yeah. Well, I would have had a couple of days off and then, let's go north. But no, we needed to sort of start making our way home a bit quicker than walking.
I thought when you said about your Garmin, I thought you were talking about your Garmin watch. And, sometimes you can do these massive, massive days. And then what I find really funny is you finally sit down and then your watch will beep like 45 minutes later saying, you need to move. And it's just like, excuse me, I've just walked like 3,000 plus kilometers here.
Yeah, I do not need, I'm not moving anywhere.
Yeah.
Apart from getting an ice cream. That's all as far as I'm moving.
You were creating content throughout the whole of your challenge. Like, how did you find that? Did you find? I mean, I don't think it takes anything away from the walk or from the challenge, but I think it definitely adds another layer of this complexivity. A word it met, in terms of. I mean, I actually don't know how you produce the videos on the go, like the TikTok videos and the Instagram Reels, etc. So what was your system? Like, how did you make it work for you?
It was really challenging. I planned at the outset to do that and had worked out how I was going to do it. But each video, I committed to making a 1-minute video, reel, TikTok, whatever. But for each of those, it effectively took me 2 hours a day. So that included the filming during the day. And even though each clip is just tiny, those clips in each individual one is about a second, and you've got a 1-minute video. So that's 60 videos you've taken throughout the day, plus all the ones you throw away. And we sort of calculated one day, I think Andrew might have been getting a little bit impatient with my pace. He sort of said, well, you're taking this many videos and, you stop for a minute or two and, this is why it's taking us longer to get to places. And absolutely right. And then I'd find once you got to camp and did the jobs you had to do, it was doing all the editing of those videos and using a program and app on my phone to do it and putting on the sound behind them and creating the captions and doing the voiceover. And sometimes I could it was great if I could do the videos each day. And sometimes I couldn't do the voiceover. I felt we're in the middle of a camp surrounded by other tents and, sort of me doing a voiceover while everyone's trying to sleep, because Andrew used to go to sleep and I'd sit up in the tent, with my head torch on making these videos. So I'd end up doing voiceovers later. And then on the longer stretches, when I could, I'd upload them every day. And on the longer stretches, it was really difficult trying to balance the need for emergency power, so to keep, being able to navigate and that kind of thing, against the need for recording videos. And I did those videos, I did those videos on my iPhone. And so I would do the filming on those longer stretches, but I wouldn't do the editing until we got to town. So I could get to town and Andrew would do all the domestic stuff, like going and sorting out the resupply and doing the laundry and that kind of stuff. And I could spend, and we would check into a room where, like a cabin or a motel room where we had some space, and I would spend 6, 7 or 8 hours just sitting on the bed creating those reels. And so I wasn't having any rest time. And then of course trying to upload them. And, our coverage in New Zealand for internet is less than average in a lot of those places that you're walking to. So that would be a challenge, because with the budget I had, I upload to all those different social media channels individually. I'm not using, an app that will spread them to all the different channels with one hit. So you're trying to get it to TikTok, you're trying to get it to Facebook or Threads or Instagram or wherever, YouTube, wherever it's going. So it was really challenging, but at the same time, it was deeply rewarding because of the comments that would come back and the support and the kindness from people, who were seeing those videos and loving what we were doing. And even, going back to when my feet were so sore, the private messages from people and the help, the practical help as well that was given, and the people we met through that. And because of Wheeling Kiwi, we had some extraordinary experiences because of that. So it's a two-way, people were giving more than I was giving.
Yeah, I love that. And you've got amazing videos. It's incredible, not only walking the trail, but also sharing it day to day, bringing people on the journey with you is so, so powerful. And Sharon, where are you most active on social media? Obviously, where should they go?
So if anyone is looking for me, I'm at Wheeling Kiwi, and you'll find me on all the main social media channels. Plus my website is thru-hiking.com, and that has those social media links. Otherwise, just go to Instagram, Facebook, Threads, TikTok, YouTube, any of them, just at Wheeling Kiwi, and you'll find me.
Awesome. I'll put all the links there, but definitely go and check out Sharon's website, Wheeling Kiwi, because it's not only, there's information there. You've got blog posts, you've got the Te Araroa series, you've got resources, there are freebies, there's specific destination information. There's also information around the group trips that you offer. And, you also run an option like to ask me anything, so people can connect with you, ask you questions, get your knowledge, get your advice, get your tips. So definitely worth checking out. But Sharon, I'd love for you to have the final words of wisdom and advice for other women out there who want to make a change, who want to undertake a different type of challenge. They want to follow their passions and just do something different. Apart from just do it, what advice would you like to share?
I think the advice that I share on what to do, and this works for me, is just believing in yourself, and in your abilities. We're all a lot stronger than we give ourselves credit for. And if someone's wanting to go out and spend more time in nature and they're looking for some encouragement from others to do something like join a local tramping club or call in some mates, and if they're not in a position, if they've not access to a tramping club or hiking club or similar, to go on to some of the more popular walks. So in New Zealand, we have what are called the Great Walks, and there's plenty of people on those walks. So you're not actually alone. And being around other people, you learn so much, and having that community around you is a great boost.
What's the next challenge?
Well, yeah. Well, as always, lacking in training because I've injured my back about a month ago. But in a couple of days, I'm heading to Australia, and Andrew and I are going to be walking the Larapinta Trail, which is right in the centre of Australia. So it's near Alice Springs, and it's a 230-kilometre walk through the outback, through the McDonnell Ranges. So we're very, very excited about that. I do not want to be breaking the drought over there. I'm hoping for dry weather, though it is going to be winter, so it'll be chilly overnight in the tent once more.
Oh, what an incredible challenge to follow along with. But Sharon, honestly, amazing to catch up with you. Amazing to speak to you. Thank you so much for coming on Tough Girl Podcast to share more about your freewheeling life of adventure and the amazing challenges that you're going on. And thank you so much for sharing all of your stories so that you can inspire other women to get out there and undertake their own challenges.
Thanks so much, Sarah, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to your audience and also to congratulate you, because I know you're coming up to 10 years with the podcast, which is absolutely amazing. So also to you keep up the marvellous work you're doing, because we all benefit from it.
Hey, tribe. How are you all doing? I hope you're keeping well. Today is the 4th of August, 2025, and it is the 10th year anniversary of the Tough Girl Podcast. The Tough Girl Podcast has been running for 10 years consistently, with new episodes being released every Tuesday at 7 a.m. UK time and bonus episodes going live on a Thursday at 7 a.m. UK time. We have just reached 800 episodes. Well, by the end of the day, when my solo episode goes live at 7 p.m. tonight, there will be 800 episodes of the Tough Girl podcast available for you to listen to. Just want to do a little bit of a shout out and also just share a little bit more information about Sharon that you may not know. So Sharon has actually been a huge supporter of the Tough Girl podcast for many years and a patron and a listener. And back in 2022, I had just finished walking the Wales Coast Path. And I was at this point, you've probably realised if you listen, I do a lot of editing, not just with the podcast, but also with the vlog. So and I actually do enjoy it. But back then I was really sort of drowning in the amount of editing and just really concerned about how am I going to edit all of this content that I have coming out. I just do not have time. I just don't have the capacity. And it wasn't about me not being productive. It was literally there are not enough hours in the day to produce this content. And I remember reaching out, I think I put it in Explorers Connect, basically looking for editors who, that was their passion. So my passion is going out, walking, hiking and sharing it. But I was looking for people whose passion is the editing and the storytelling, and they want to, sit and edit and pull the footage together and add the music and add the vibe and create these amazing stories from the footage. And through Explorers Connect, I put out an advert basically saying, please help me. I need editors. I'm willing to split. To be fair, the YouTube channel doesn't make me any money at all. It's, I think I made £10 last year. That's not even a joke. And I can't afford to pay someone to edit for the amount of hours it would take to edit these types of products. And, and I do think people should be paid for the work that they do. So I was asking people who could, who had the time, who had the capacity, sort of a volunteer capacity to work with me on this project. And Sharon reached out and we ended up having a phone call. It's an amazing chat. And I just learned, more about Sharon and her passion. And, we got on so well. And Sharon was just amazing. I cannot tell you what a massive help it was for me having Sharon's support back in 2022. So Sharon came on board and started editing the Wales Coast Path vlogs. You can go and check them out. They are on the Tough Girl Challenges YouTube channel. Absolutely amazing. She turned the footage that I provided into these wonderful little stories and little recaps from walking the Wales Coast Path. And it was to help sort of celebrate the 10th year anniversary of the Wales Coast Path. And I did it in a part with Cicerone, the guidebook company. So #challenge with Cicerone. So I've known Sharon for quite a while, and it was actually quite gutting that we never got to meet when we were in New Zealand. It just so happened that we were both walking the trail together, but Sharon was always a couple of weeks ahead of me, and I thought at one point that I'd be able to catch her up, but it just didn't quite happen. So we've never actually met face to face, which is it's so weird that you can have these amazing connections and amazing relationships with people sort of all over the world. But basically, this is just an ode to Sharon for being an absolute superstar, an absolute supporter of other women. And it's just been amazing, to get her on the podcast and to see the journey that she has been on since that she shared her dream of, wanting to change her career, wanting to motivate and inspire, more women to embrace the outdoors, especially sort of later on in life. And honestly, if you haven't done so already, please do go and watch her TikToks and her reels from walking the Te Araroa Trail, because an amazing storyteller. She's done some incredible things, and she's also, obviously we talked about it on this episode, she's heading out to Australia to walk the Lara Pinta Trail. So go and give Sharon a follow. But what she's doing to empower women over 50 to step into the wild and to build their confidence is absolutely inspiring. So Sharon, if you're listening, thank you so much for all of the support that you've provided me and for all the incredible editing and work that you did on the Wales Coast Path. It was just amazing to have you reach out. And on that note, if anyone's listening who's oh, Sarah, I love editing, I'd love to help you. I need help editing the Southwest Coast Path vlogs, or else they're not going to be edited until 2026. So if this is you, then please do reach out, sarah@toughgirlchallenges.com. That would be absolutely epic. Thank you so much for all your incredible support. I'd love you to support the Tough Girl podcast. You can visit Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl podcast. You can sign up as a monthly patron or an annual patron. Or if you're just Sarah, I've been listening to you for 10 years. Why don't I just donate you £10? Go to the website, and if you scroll to the bottom, there is a PayPal link. You can just send me over some cash. That would be amazing. Make a donation, help support the work that I'm doing to increase the amount of female role models in the media. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you tell a friend, and all that's left for me to say is, wherever you are, whatever you are doing, give it your all. Give it 110%. Get after it. Go for it. Believe in yourself because I believe in you. Take care. Lots of love, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.